You see stories on the news, hear them whispered in hushed tones, the ones that seem too strange to be true. A car accident, a tragic fire, a life cut short in its prime. But what if the story you're told isn't the real one? What if the tragedy is just the beginning of a much darker, much more twisted tale? Elias Thorne was the kind of man you'd pass on the street and forget, not because he was unremarkable, but because he was so perfectly normal. 48 years old, an architect with a knack for elegant, sustainable design, he had a quiet life in a quiet suburb. His days were a predictable rhythm of early morning coffee, long hours hunched over blueprints, and evenings spent with his wife, Clara. She was a sculptor, an artist whose hands were often stained with clay, her mind alive with shapes and forms. Their home was a gallery of her work and his architectural models, a testament to two creative souls living in harmony. They were the kind of couple that made you believe in a shared, lasting love. But there was a subtle shift in Elias, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Started slowly. He'd get a call and his face would tighten. A package would arrive, and he'd take it straight to his study, a door that was now locked with a new, firm click. Clara noticed, of course. She'd ask, her voice gentle, "Is everything all right, love?" And he'd just offer a tired smile and say it was just work, a high-stress project. The project was the Tesseract Bridge, a massive undertaking that would span a new river bypass, a feat of modern engineering he had been dreaming of his whole career. He talked about it with a mix of pride and a strange, deep-seated anxiety. One rainy Tuesday, Elias left for a site meeting. He gave Clara a long, lingering hug, a kiss that felt like a goodbye, though neither of them would have dared to say it. The rain turned into a downpour, and the day bled into night. She tried calling his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She wasn't worried at first. He was probably just in a spotty coverage area. But by midnight, a cold dread had begun to seep into her bones. The phone rang, and the caller ID was a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was calm, detached. It was a police officer. They had found his car. The car was a twisted, charred wreck at the bottom of a ravine, a mile or so off the highway he should have been on. A witness reported seeing a vehicle lose control on the slick road and plummet over the guardrail. The fire was so intense, so fast, that by the time first responders arrived, there was little left to identify. The license plate was scorched but still legible. The car was his. They told Clara they had found remains inside. The body was unrecognizable, but they used dental records and what was left of his driver's license to make a positive identification. Elias Thorne, they said, was gone. The news hit her like a physical blow. The world went silent, then shattered into a million sharp, painful pieces. Her husband, her love, the man who knew her heart better than anyone, was just a set of dental records. The police spoke of a tragic accident, a slick road, a moment of lost control. But something didn't sit right with Clara. Elias was an exceptionally cautious driver. He knew that stretch of road. The police spoke about the severity of the fire as something normal for a crash of that magnitude, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was too clean, too complete. There was nothing left to question. Everything was a closed case, and in her darkest hours, surrounded by the silence of their home, Clara started to wonder, did he really lose control? Or was he forced off the road? She had no proof, just a nagging, terrible feeling. The funeral arrangements had to be made. A final farewell to a life that had been so cruelly stolen. A goodbye to a man whose love she could still feel echoing in the empty halls of their house. She had to bury him, even though a part of her refused to believe he was truly gone. Grief is a strange and isolating landscape. For Clara, it wasn't just a raw, tearing sadness. It was a physical weight, a constant pressure on her chest. The world moved on, but she was trapped in a moment of perpetual gray. The scent of Elias's favorite coffee still clung to the kitchen. His jacket still hung on the hook by the door. Each day felt like a cruel, unending replay of the day she lost him. Friends and family came, their faces etched with sympathy, offering platitudes that felt empty in the face of her loss. He's in a better place. It was God's will, but none of it mattered. All she knew was that Elias was gone. Her brother, David, a hard-nosed private investigator with a cynical streak, was her one true anchor. He didn't offer empty words. He just sat with her, in the quiet, drinking coffee and holding her hand. But even David couldn't shake the nagging questions. He had read the police report. He had spoken to the officers. The whole thing felt off. The description of the accident was almost generic. A lone car, a slick road, a ravine. It was the kind of story you read 100 times, and that was exactly what bothered him. There was no detail, no unique signature. It was almost as if it had been a story written by committee. He noticed the small things. The car's black box, which should have recorded the final moments, was completely destroyed by the fire. That's common, the police said. High-impact crashes. Fires. It happens. But David knew that most of those boxes were built to withstand extreme heat. The remains, too. The identification was made based on dental records provided by Clara's dentist. But the report said the body was so badly burned that it was little more than ash and bone fragments. David's investigator's mind kept circling back to it. How could they be so sure? The official report mentioned his driver's license, but it was Elias's habit to keep his wallet in the glove compartment, not on his person when he drove. A small detail, but one that gnawed at David. And then there was the project, the Tesseract Bridge. Elias had been acting strangely right before the accident. David had tried to talk to him about it, but Elias had been evasive. He just said it was a lot of pressure, that a huge corporation, Meridian Infrastructure, was breathing down his neck. The company was pushing for shortcuts, cheaper materials, and Elias, being the ethical man he was, refused to sign off on a design he felt was unsafe. He was a man of principles, and David knew he would die before he compromised his integrity. The police, when asked about Meridian, just said it was a business dispute and not relevant to the accident. David wasn't so sure. He started looking into Meridian Infrastructure himself, and what he found was disturbing. They had a history of accidents and unfortunate incidents with contractors and designers who challenged their methods. It was a pattern of quiet disappearances and sudden, tragic events. The funeral was just a week away. The preparations were a blur of black fabric, flower arrangements, and eulogies. Clara chose a simple mahogany coffin, though it was little more than a vessel for the few remains they had been given. She was a ghost in her own home, walking through the motions, her mind a million miles away, replaying every moment with Elias, every conversation, every kiss. She kept seeing the little things. The way he would tap his fingers on the table when he was deep in thought. The way he would hum a quiet tune when he was happy. The way he looked at her with such love. It was this love that she clung to, the one solid thing in a world that had become liquid and shifting. She had to say goodbye. She had to give him a proper burial. She had to, because the alternative, the idea that she was walking through this nightmare alone, that he was gone forever and there was a chance, a tiny, terrible chance, that something more sinister had happened, was too much to bear. It was easier to grieve the man she lost than to search for the man who might still be out there, hunted by ghosts she couldn't see. While Clara was preparing to bury her husband, another man was living a ghost's life. He wore a heavy beard and a battered baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He slept in cheap motels and ate cold food from gas station convenience stores. His name was Elias Thorne, and he was very much alive. The fire, the crash, the presumed death, it was all a carefully orchestrated act. A final, desperate move in a game he never wanted to play. It had started with the Tesseract Bridge. Elias had discovered that Meridian Infrastructure wasn't just cutting corners. They were using substandard materials and forging safety reports. The bridge, as designed, would be a disaster waiting to happen, a collapse that would claim countless lives. The proof was in his project files, a mountain of forged documents and hidden emails he had spent months piecing together. He had tried to go to his superiors, but they laughed him off. He tried the State Regulatory Commission, but his complaint was dismissed as a business dispute. The system was rigged, and Meridian was everywhere. One day, an envelope was slid under his office door. Inside was a single, chilling photograph. A picture of Clara, her back to the camera, walking their dog in the park. On the back, in cold, black letters, were 3 words. Stop this now. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He wasn't just fighting for his professional integrity anymore. He was fighting for Clara's life. He knew that if he went public, Meridian would not just silence him. They would destroy everything he loved. They were a company that operated in the shadows, using threats and fear to get what they wanted. He couldn't risk it. He couldn't go to the police. They were in Meridian's pocket. He couldn't go to the media. They would just be putting a target on Clara's back. He had to disappear, not just from his life but from the world. The plan was a terrible and painful one. He would fake his death. He would make it look like a tragic accident. He knew the stretch of road where the bridge would be built, a lonely, winding route perfect for a staged event. He had carefully planned every detail, every agonizing step. He bought a junk car, one that looked like his, and fitted it with a new engine. He planted his driver's license and some of his dental information in a small, metal box he had carefully hidden inside the car. He set a timer. He drove the car to the ravine, pushed it over the edge, and then, with a heavy heart, watched it tumble and burst into flames, a grotesque funeral pyre for the life he was leaving behind. He then walked away, vanishing into the night, the sound of the sirens a final mournful song. Living on the run was a special kind of torment. Every day he fought the urge to call Clara, to just hear her voice. He saw the news reports, saw the pictures of his own funeral preparations. He saw Clara's gaunt, tear-streaked face on the television screen, her eyes hollow with grief. It was the hardest thing he had ever had to do. He had to be a ghost, a memory, to save her. But he couldn't stay gone forever. He had the proof, the files, the smoking gun that would bring Meridian down. He couldn't die for nothing. He had to expose them, and he knew just the place to do it. The funeral was coming, a public gathering of all the people who mattered to him. It was a chance he couldn't pass up. He had to show up, not as a mourner, but as a witness, the most unexpected witness of all. The day of the funeral was a cold, gray blur. The sky was the color of lead, and a fine, miserable drizzle had begun to fall. Inside the chapel, 100 people sat in hushed reverence, their faces somber, their bodies clad in black. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and the quiet hum of unspoken sorrow. Clara sat in the front row, a black veil shielding her face from the world, but not from the relentless ache in her heart. She held her brother David's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. The eulogy was being read by Elias's old college friend, a man whose voice cracked with emotion as he spoke of Elias's kindness, his integrity, and his passion. He was a man who built things, the friend said, his voice a choked whisper. Bridges, homes, and most of all, he built trust. Just as he was about to conclude, a sound echoed from the back of the chapel. A firm, deliberate footstep. All eyes turned to the large oak doors. A figure stood silhouetted against the weak light from outside. He was tall, dressed in a simple dark suit, his face obscured by a thick, unkempt beard and a low-slung baseball cap. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Clara's head snapped up. Her heart, which had felt like a hollow void for weeks, suddenly began to pound with a furious, impossible rhythm. She couldn't see his face, but there was something in the way he stood, the way he carried himself, a posture that she knew better than her own. He walked down the aisle, his eyes fixed on Clara. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He simply approached the front, the sound of his footsteps the only thing in the entire world. When he reached the coffin, he slowly, deliberately reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather briefcase. He turned to face the stunned crowd. Then he lifted his hand and pulled off the baseball cap. A collective, stunned gasp filled the room. It was him. It was Elias. He looked older, his face etched with strain and loss, but it was him, undeniably him. Clara stood up, her veil falling away from her face, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and unbelievable hope. "Elias?" she whispered, her voice a fragile thing. He offered a small, sad smile. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I had to." He turned to the crowd. "My name is Elias Thorne, and I'm here to tell you that the man you are mourning is a victim, but he isn't dead. He is standing right in front of you. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. He had the evidence, the forged reports, the emails, the proof that Meridian Infrastructure was building a death trap of a bridge. "They tried to kill me," he said, his voice growing stronger, "because I wouldn't compromise. They faked my death to silence me." He pointed to a small group of well-dressed men who were now looking panicked in the front row, the Meridian executives who had attended the funeral to be sure he was gone. "And they're here," he added, his voice ringing with triumph. The police, who had been called by a panicked guest, arrived. The executives were taken into custody, and as the chaos died down, Clara finally reached him. She didn't speak. She just threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest, her sobs a mixture of relief and overwhelming emotion. Elias held her tight, his eyes filled with tears. He was home. He was alive. He had risked everything to save her and to expose the truth, and now he was finally safe. The funeral, which had been a symbol of an ending, was now a new beginning. A new life, built on a foundation of truth and an unwavering love that had survived the impossible. And that, my friends, is a powerful lesson. The truth is a stubborn thing. You can bury it, you can burn it, you can pretend it doesn't exist. But in the end, it always finds a way to rise from the ashes. It might be messy, it might be painful, but it's worth fighting for. And the same goes for a good story. So if you found yourself on the edge of your seat, caught up in the twists and turns of this tale, I hope you'll consider sticking around. There are a lot more stories like this one to tell. So please, if you haven't already, take a moment to like this video. It helps us know what you want to see more of. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the little notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable story. You never know what's going to happen next, just like Elias didn't.